A stock car looks like nothing special. 4 doors, a trunk, a shape you'd recognize from a used car lot. Then it hits 190 miles an hour, and that's the part that stops making sense, because the fastest cars in America are, by rule, supposed to look ordinary. Not sleek, not futuristic, ordinary. NASCAR still calls them stock cars, as if somewhere under the sponsor decals and the roll cage, there's just a sedan somebody drives to work. That rule wasn't an aesthetic choice, it was a survival strategy. And the men who needed it weren't racing for trophies, they were racing to not get caught. To find the real reason, you have to go back to the 1920s, into the hills of the Appalachian South, where farmers had been making liquor out of corn for generations. When Prohibition banned alcohol nationwide in 1920, that backwoods habit turned into a full black market. Someone had to move the product from a hidden still in the woods to a buyer in the city, at night, without getting stopped. That job went to the runners. A runner's car had to do something strange. It had to be fast enough to outrun federal agents on narrow mountain roads, and ordinary enough that nobody looked twice it had parked outside a diner. Speed and disguise, working against each other, both required at once. So the runners built cars that lied about themselves. Under a plain, unremarkable body, they hid stiffened suspensions and hopped-up engines, especially once Ford's Flathead V8 arrived in the early 1930s and gave backroad mechanics a cheap, powerful base to work with. From the outside, a family sedan. Underneath, something built to outrun the law. This is where the evolutionary logic kicks in, even though nobody was thinking about evolution. The revenue agents acted like a selection pressure. Slow cars got caught. Careless drivers got caught. Only the fastest, most controlled driving survived long enough to keep running. Over years of this, an entire skill set got selected for, refined by consequence rather than by training. One of those skills was a specific escape move. Slam the wheel, yank the emergency brake, spin the car 180 degrees in the space of one lane, and drive back the way you came, before a pursuing officer had time to react. Drivers called it the bootleg turn. It wasn't taught in any manual. It was invented under pressure by people who did not have the option of failing. Junior Johnson, later a NASCAR Hall of Famer, was reportedly running liquor on those roads before he was even a teenager, learning to drive the same way most kids learn to ride a bike, except the stakes were a jail cell. He said later that moonshining wasn't separate from his racing career, it was the training for it. And here's the part the industry buried for decades. On weekends, some of these same runners started racing each other, informally, on dirt tracks, just to settle who was actually the fastest. Spectators showed up, then more spectators. What started as bragging rights between outlaws became a public spectacle, drawing crowds who had no idea they were watching bootleggers test drive their escape cars. By the late 1940s, that spectacle outgrew itself. There were no consistent rules, no standard car classes, no shared championship. So in December 1947, Bill France Sr., a driver and promoter, called a meeting at a hotel in Daytona Beach to organize the chaos into something official. 2 months later, in February 1948, the first sanctioned race under a new name ran on the sand and pavement of Daytona Beach. NASCAR had a name now, it just hadn't lost its roots. The cost of that origin wasn't small. Prohibition ended in 1933, but the tax laws that made moonshine profitable did not, and plenty of the men who built their driving skills running liquor kept one foot in that world long after they'd become racing celebrities. Fame didn't erase the old habits, it just gave them a legal stage to perform on some nights, and left the rest for the roads nobody was watching. Which brings you back to that stock car at 190 miles an hour. The body shape isn't a nostalgic design choice, it's a fossil. A leftover instinct from a time when looking normal was the only thing standing between a driver and a set of handcuffs. The engine roaring underneath is the part that never had to hide. The plain shape around it is the part that did. Every checkered flag today sits on top of that same old contradiction. A sport built entirely on speed, wearing the disguise of something completely unremarkable. Nobody designed it that way on purpose. It just survived that way.